Hey everyone, Tom the Dilettante here. Do you have quick and easy access to spare power when you need it? Whether for camping or around the house, a portable power station like this Bluetti unit here can be a real game changer. Devices like these give you regular 110 volt AC power like what you'd find in US home outlets, 12 volt DC for anything you might plug into a car, USB ports for things like phones and cameras, and much more. Depending on the size you choose and what you plug into it, you can power what you need for a couple of hours or up to a couple of days. And most of these are rechargeable by solar panels, allowing you to fulfill your off-grid power needs pretty much indefinitely. I bought my first one of these back about a year ago, this Jackery 500 for overlanding and emergency home power. I've used it to run my portable refrigerator, power mobile ham radio fun, keep my home internet running during blackouts, and charge just about every device I bring with me when camping or overlanding. Now honestly, the only reason I got the Jackery was because, well, they market the shit out of these things. They look awesome on social media, and reviews online and on YouTube are overwhelmingly positive. And having used this thing for over a year now, I can say it is pretty great. But as with anything, there's always room for improvement. So when Bluetti reached out to me last month and asked if I would like to do a review on their EB55 model, basically a direct competitor to this Jackery 500, I got pretty excited. After all, these things aren't cheap, and a normal person like me probably isn't going to spend a lot of money buying one unit from each brand just to compare. So today, my good fortune is your good fortune. I'm going to give you an overview of this Bluetti unit and compare it to the only other device like it that I've known, this Jackery 500. In this video, I'll cover the EB55 specs and features, which you can also find on their website, share with you the results of my performance testing, tell you what I like about it in general and relative to the Jackery, give you my thoughts on what I don't like about it, and then wrap up with a summary and my recommendations. For your convenience, this video is divided into chapters for each of the sections I just mentioned. Now before anyone gets the wrong idea, yes, Bluetti did send this unit to me for free to review. However, I'm not obligated to provide a positive review. In fact, the only products that I accept on this channel are ones that don't come with any requirements for a positive review. I don't do this for a living, and quite frankly, my integrity just isn't for sale. So the fact that Bluetti still sent me this $500 unit, despite that condition, tells me at the very least they're pretty confident in their product. So let's find out. The Bluetti EB55 is a 537 watt-hour portable power station. Power is provided by a lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery technology and managed by a built-in battery management system that provides multiple layers of charge and discharge protection. To access all this power, Bluetti provides a lot of options. Starting off with AC power, you get 4 110 volt AC outlets, 2 3-prong and 2 2-prong, powered by a pure sine wave inverter good for 700 watts continuous draw and a surge of 1400 watts. I personally always look for a pure sine wave inverter to ensure that I can safely use it for sensitive electronics like my laptop. For DC power, you get one regulated 12 volt 10 amp carport plug alongside two 12 volt 10 amp 5.5 by 2.1 millimeter ports. USB options include one 100 watt USB-C port for fast charging and 4 standard 5 volt 3 amp USB-A ports. Finally, you get a 15 watt wireless charging pad conveniently placed at the top of the unit. When you buy the Bluetti, you get the power station, a manual, an AC charger, a DC charger, and they even toss in an MC4 to XT60 solar charging cable, not something that you get included with the Jackery 500. Speaking of which, let's pause here for a moment and compare all these features between the Bluetti and the Jackery. The first, and to me the biggest difference between the two, is the battery technology used in each. The Bluetti uses LFP battery technology, whereas the Jackery uses lithium nickel manganese cobalt oxide, or NMC battery technology. Now, NMC batteries may have higher energy density, but according to my research, they're also more volatile and potentially more dangerous. Manufacturers using NMC technology go to great lengths to ensure their devices are equipped with good over and under charge protections. The reason is because NMC batteries can become dangerously unstable if they get too hot, either from charging, discharging, or environmental conditions. And while both units offer close to the same capacity at 537 watt-hours and 518 watt-hours respectively, the difference in battery technology is pretty clear when you look at some other important specs. Power output, for example, is considerably different, with the Bluetti offering 700 watts continuous power and 1400 watts peak versus the Jackery's 500 watts continuous power and 1000 watt peak. The life cycle difference is even larger, with Bluetti's LFP batteries being good for 2500 charge cycles before reaching 80% capacity, Compared to Jackery's 500 cycles, that's 5 times more charge as you get between otherwise similar devices. Lastly, the difference in battery technology affects how quickly you can charge each device. The Bluetti comes with a 200-watt charger, which means you can recharge this thing within 3 hours. Or, because the EB55 can handle up to 400 watts of input, you can purchase a second AC charger to combine with the original one that comes with it, and get this thing charged up in under 2 hours. This is one of those things I didn't realize was so nice to have until I had it. The Jackery 500 charges just fine, but it can only accommodate a max of 100-watt input. The AC charger it came with takes damn near 7.5 hours to get the job done. Let me put it to you this way. While conducting the discharge tests I'll get to in a moment, I was able to charge and discharge the Bluetti 3 times in the time it took me to charge the Jackery once. I don't know about you, but to me that's a pretty impressive and valuable difference. If the difference in battery technology isn't hitting home for you, maybe the difference is in how you access the power will. The Bluetti offers 4 AC outputs versus the Jackery 500's 1, 4 USB-A ports versus 3, 2 input options versus 1, and uses what I think is a more common 12-volt DC plug, the 5.5 by 2.1 mm versus the 6.5 by 1.4 mm option in the Jackery. Both have regulated 12-volt DC carport plug, but the high-power USB-C and wireless charger are unique to the Bluetti. So far, it seems to me like the Bluetti offers more bang for the buck. Let's put them through some tests to see how they actually perform compared to one another. To test the Bluetti against the Jackery, I ran them from full charge to dead on DC and AC to see how much of each unit's advertised capacity is actually usable. For the DC test, I plugged in my Maker Hawk electronic load tester and ran a load of about 8.2 amps until the battery would give no more. For the AC test, I ran each unit to its stopping point using a small space heater that pulled about 440 watts. Each test was run 3 times to provide you with an average performance readout. Here's what I learned. On the DC test, I pulled an average of 468.6 watt-hours from the Bluetti over 3 runs. The Jackery gave up an average 468.5 watt-hours over its 3 runs. So, the usable power from each unit is pretty much identical. However, when you consider the Bluetti's advertised capacity of 537 watt-hours and the Jackery's advertised capacity of 518 watt-hours, this means we got 87.3% utilization from the EB55 and 90.5% from the 500. I'll leave it to you to decide if you feel one is better than the other. For me though, the usable watt hours is what matters. And since we got about 468 watt hours out of each, I'm going to call this a tie. On the AC test, I got 413.7 watt hours on average from the Bluetti and 426 watt hours on average from the Jackery. This translates into a utilization of 77% and 82.2% respectively between the 2 brands. Now, I'm no electrical engineer, but it would seem to me that the inverter on the Jackery is slightly more efficient than the one on the Bluetti. Now, while the usable power isn't different enough between the two to be a deal breaker for me, I'm going to give this one to the Jackery for its slightly more efficient usage. Weight-wise, the Bluetti clocked in at 16.4 pounds or 7.4 kilograms. The Jackery weighed in at 13.6 pounds or 6.2 kilograms. While that might not seem like a lot, that does amount to a 20% difference between the two. So while 3 pounds doesn't amount to a make or break decision for me, if minimizing weight is a high priority for you, then Jackery takes the win in this category. All in all, I really like the Bluetti unit. And had I known about this thing at the time I bought the Jackery 500, I can confidently say I would have bought the EB55 instead. I like that it comes with 4 AC outlets. I always end up bringing a small power strip with me to plug into the Jackery's 1 AC outlet because I often find myself needing more than 1 outlet at a time. The battery performance is of course another thing I like about the Bluetti. Before doing some research for this video, I had no idea there was that big of a difference between various battery technologies. I figured the 100-watt charge rate and 500 charge cycle limits were par for the course for these things. Knowing now that I can charge the Bluetti's LFP batteries 4 times as fast and get 5 times the life out of them makes me feel a little foolish for not doing more research when I first bought the Jackery. So, assuming this thing actually lives up to its advertised specs, I think it offers considerably more bang for the buck. Oddly enough, the shape of the Bluetti is something I like as well. It's basically a box. It has a nice flat surface. My Jackery has this built-in handle-like thing that you can't really set anything on top of. Maybe it's just me, but I like having a flat surface at my disposal. And the fact that the Bluetti's flat surface not only serves as something to put stuff on, it serves as a 15-watt wireless charger, and that's just a handy thing to have. On the topic of handy things, the light on the Bluetti is actually useful compared to that of the Jackery. Here's an example of the Bluetti light shining on my GX in the dark from about 5 feet away. For comparison, here's the Jackery light from the same distance. Between the two, I think the Bluetti light is likely to get more use both at camp and in emergencies. All in all, there's a lot to like about the EB55. All the features I shared earlier are things that I like, but let me share with you some of the things that I don't like. So I've had a lot of good things to say about the Bluetti so far. That's because I think all in all, a lot of good thought went into the technology. Where I think it falls short is I don't think the same amount of good thought went into the user experience. There are 3 main things I dislike about the Bluetti EB55, and I hope Bluetti is listening and taking notes because I know I'm not the first one to point these out. First, the display. I really dislike this display. It's either on or off, which I get probably makes sense to conserve power and not run a display all the time, but compared to the Jackery, which has a constant display with a button-activated backlight, there's no way for you to simply glance at the Bluetti to see how much power you have left. You have to get up, walk over to it, push a button just to get the display going. And once the display is on, it gives you precious little in the way of usable information. Sure, you get input and output power readouts, but what's the most likely question you want to answer when you check your portable power station? How much battery is left, right? Well, the answer to that question is far from forthcoming from the Bluetti display. All you have to go on is this stacked battery graphic that tells you how much power you have left in 20% increments. As you get to the bottom, you could have 20% or 2%. Who knows? I don't. The Jackery, on the other hand, has the same battery graphic, but right next to it is arguably the single most useful number you can put on a device like this, the exact percent of charge remaining. In my opinion, changing this one thing would take the Bluetti user experience up a couple worthwhile notches. Continuing with display gripes, the indicator light and the various buttons letting you know which sections are turned on are small and difficult to read. Not only are the Jackery's buttons recessed to prevent accidental activation, they have much larger indicator lights that are very easy to see at a glance and from afar. Lastly, the Bluetti lacks an indicator letting you know that it's charging. On one hand, as I'll get to in a minute, you can't help but hear when the AC charger is running. On the other hand, it'd be nice to be able to glance over and have a visual indicator of when the thing's charging. Again, using my Jackery as a reference, it has a prominent indicator light letting you know when it's plugged in, which I just find handy to have. Second on the list of things I dislike about the Bluetti is the built-in light. Not the light itself, which as I said earlier is actually pretty good, but rather the light switch. You see, you can't simply turn it on and off, or at least I haven't figured out how to do that yet. The single button on the light toggles you through low, high, and what I think is supposed to be SOS in Morse code. It has the right number of flashes, but is way off insofar as cadence. Anyway, I have used this light in the dark, and I hated having to cycle through all its modes every time I wanted to turn it on. This just seems like it should be a simple thing to change, and I hope Bluetti is listening and changes it in the future. The third and last thing I dislike about the Bluetti EB55 is that it's a bit noisy. If and when the cooling fans come on, you're likely to hear them. I took this thing on a 5,000-mile cross-country trip to California and was able to hear the cooling fans kick on from the rear seat over the drone of the highway. I don't recall ever hearing the Jackery's fans cycle on and off, and even though the Bluetti's fans didn't come on very often, when they did, I found it rather conspicuous. The AC charger for this thing is also pretty noisy. When it's plugged in, the fans are running, and they're running constantly. Here's what that sounds like with my camera 6 inches away from it. For reference, here's what my DeWalt 18-volt drill sounds like running about 8 feet away in the background. And while it's not the worst thing in the world, I thought it rather obnoxious. Those are my dislikes of this unit, and while my criticism may seem harsh, my likes outweigh the dislikes, and this is still something I would have bought over the Jackery. So to sum up, the Bluetti EB55 is quite the capable little unit. Priced the same as the Jackery 500 as of this video, it has about the same usable power, but offers 3 more AC outlets, 2 more USB outlets, an additional input, a wireless charger, 4 times faster charge rate, 5 times as many charge cycles, a more functional built-in light, and a shape made for packing. Despite the poorly thought out display and somewhat noisy charger and cooling fans, I still think the EB55 is a more versatile and practical option than its Jackery cousin over here. Which is why if I had to do it again and pick a portable power station, I would have chosen the Bluetti between the two. I hope you found this review and comparison helpful. If I missed anything or if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'm super happy to have both of these units right now. The Jackery is probably going to stay at home most of the time, and the Bluetti is going to be my overlanding unit of choice. Thank you for your time as always, and until the next time, this is Tom the Dilettante saying keep on tinkering, keep on learning. Have a good one.